right, well, let's get started. We're 5 after the hour. I'm excited, happy to have you here. So this talk is called How to Conduct Exit Interviews and Use What You Learned to Stop Other Customers from Leaving. So I'm going to actually start, first of all, by thanking Growth Mentor for putting this on. As Spiros knows, it's a lot of work to put something like this together. And I'd like to say thank you for bringing us together to share in this experience. Now, I'm going to start with this story. So this is about a client that came to us and hired us, and they were totally crippled by 60-day churn. Now, you might not know what churn is. I work with B2B SaaS companies, and churn is simply when a paying customer no longer pays. So we call that that they have churned. So if you hear me talking throughout this presentation about churn, churn is just when a customer stops being a customer. So this client came to us and they had a 60-day churn rate. So that meant 60 days after a cohort of customers signed up. About 60 days later, nearly one-third of them were no longer customers. And as you know, nearly a third of your customers leaving in the first 60 days makes it really, really hard to have a profitable business. So I did with this client what I do with all my clients, and I asked them why they thought their customers are leaving. And they told me their customers said their products were too expensive, that the customers no longer needed the product, you know, like the usual things I hear. And this particular client of mine had a cancellation flow where they asked customers the reasons why they were leaving. And I'm sure you've probably been through a cancellation flow like this. It's just an automated series of questions that companies ask when you're canceling your service. Something like Audible by Amazon, they have a great cancellation flow. So in this cancellation flow, my client had the top reasons why their customers churned, and they had, you know, it was too expensive, they no longer needed the product. But this is where it really gets interesting. And that is that we ran a series of exit interviews for their customers that were in the process of canceling. So they were going through this cancellation flow. And we asked them all sorts of questions, and we took the results and then we analyzed them. And then we reported what we heard. And needless to say, these clients were shocked. They heard that more than 60% of the exiting customers that we interviewed on their behalf were leaving because of a missing product feature. So that's right, it wasn't the price, and it wasn't because they no longer needed the product. It was because of a missing product feature. And what really made my clients upset, you ready for this? The feature was already built and active. So needless to say, my clients had to make some really big decisions around marketing and that feature, and they ended up updating their ideal customer profiles at the same time. And those changes came directly as a result of speaking to their exiting customers. So let me take you through, tell you a little bit about who I am. My name's Anita Toth, as you can see right there. And I've been conducting customer feedback interviews for over 20 years. Our clients are B2B SaaS companies with 10 million to 50 million annual recurring revenue. And the tips you'll learn today are based on the methods my company uses to interview customers on behalf of our clients. And that's what I'm here to show you today. You know as well as I do, it's never easy learning that a customer is leaving, but as they prepare to leave, you have a rare opportunity to find out why. And when properly structured and executed, exit interviews provide a unique chance to dig deep and extract valuable information which can lead to actionable insights and keep your customers longer and have them buying more. So in today's session, we're going to cover how to conduct exit interviews like a pro, the expert ways to dig deep and extract the most valuable information from exiting customers, and how to take that valuable data and use it to stop other customers from leaving. All right, why should you even bother with exit interviews? Well, a Customer exit interviews are a powerful method to gather valuable customer feedback to better understand why customers have chosen to leave. And it's also to prevent future churn. So again, churn is when a customer stops being a customer. In some industries, it's also called customer attrition. So this valuable data can be used cross-functionally to reduce churn and increase revenues. For example, your product team might be able to build the feature requirements most tied to increasing revenue. Your marketing team will be able to use the feedback to create stronger messaging and attract better fitting customers. And your customer success and sales team, let me just move that, will be able to set better expectations in the sales process and across the customer journey. So by having a systematic exit interview strategy, you'll be able to capture critical insights, to confidently make better and more accurate revenue driving changes. So every single type of customer interview has like 3-step interview process. The first is the pre-interview, then of course you have the interview, and then no surprise, the post-interview. And what we're going to do in this talk is dive deep into those 3 areas so you can either successfully run customer exit interviews in-house or to confidently hire an expert third party to run them on your behalf. So let's look at the first step, which is step 1, the pre-interview. And within the pre-interview step, there are actually 5 steps. We call them the 5 Ps, and it's also known as your strategic interview plan. So the purpose of the interviews, we're going to talk about planning for people and data, pre-writing the questions, and populating with the right people, and then lastly, practice. Now, purpose of the interviews, it might seem obvious, but the purpose of the interviews may differ according to what you're looking to achieve. For example, you might only be interested in interviewing decision makers about why they churn to discover the process they make in the decision to leave. Or maybe you're interested in learning the top 3 reasons why users of a certain product churn. Or maybe you want to understand why accounts of a certain size are leaving. As you can see, the reasons for conducting exit interviews are different. By selecting one purpose for conducting the interview, everything you do around the exit interviews will be aligned with this one purpose. So it's critical to have one purpose for your exit interviews. And the reason is you want to have clarity so that if something isn't clearly aligned with the one purpose, you just don't include it. You want to be able to compare. So at the end of the interviews, you want to compare results across every single person that's been interviewed. And this is important because you want to make sure what you're hearing from your customers isn't by accident. And then also for completeness. The one purpose helps ensure the entire process of creating and executing and acting on the exit interviews is completed. So the best practice here, exit interviews best practice, select one purpose for conducting the interviews. Okay, on to the second P, plan for the people and the data. This is the stage where your exit interview strategy either succeeds or fails. And the biggest mistake people make when creating their own exit interviews is that they fail to plan for the people and the data. So we're going to go through that right now so that you don't make that mistake. Okay, let's start with planning for the people. You want to answer the following questions. Number 1, who is the interviewer? Interviewing is a skill and it's really similar to sales. So you have some salespeople that are okay, some salespeople that are good, and then you have all-star salespeople. And what differentiates the okay from the all-star salespeople is skill. So interviewing is a skill that takes years to perfect, but even in a few months, your interviewers can become really good at interviewing your churned customers. So what you want to do is have 2 dedicated team members to undertake all of the exit interviews. And the reason to dedicate team members is it builds their interviewing skills. They'll be better able to identify emerging information, so new reasons why customers might be leaving, and they won't be associated with the customer. So if one of them is unavailable for whatever reason or changes jobs, you still have a trained interviewer available. And the reason why you want an interviewer who isn't associated with the customer is because the customer then can feel free to be a little more honest about their feelings. Now, one thing that you want to consider right at the beginning is, what is the appreciation or thank you gift? So I want you to think of it this way. The customer is leaving. The exit interview is your last chance to speak with them before they go. And your customer is generously offered to spend time that they can never get back just to be interviewed by your team. So the customer truly has no obligation to do this. The customer is helping you without necessarily benefit for them. And this is your opportunity to make a really good last impression, even if the customer is very unhappy. The appreciation thank you gift should be a choice of two different options. One is you can donate a set dollar amount in their name to a charity of their choice. And the second is a set dollar amount gift card. And when you're looking to conduct these customer exit interviews, you're going to want to set aside some budget to cover the costs of these options. And you can choose how much each option should cost. So I get asked this question a lot. I generally suggest about $25 on the low end for users of, let's say, if you have a cheap product, up to $300 for the C-suite. So anything less than $25 for a 30-minute interview doesn't really show the value of their time. And anything more than $300 for a 30-minute interview, and it might appear as if you're trying to entice them to come back. So just keep these things in mind when you're talking about the budget for your appreciation or thank you gift. Now, just like you needed to plan the people part of your exit interview strategy, you're also going to need to plan what you're going to do with the data once it's done. So let's look at planning for the data. And this is one of the reasons why companies shy away from undertaking interviews is the amount of work that goes into transcribing the data. Way back in the olden days when I was starting, we used to do this by hand. It was awful. But now you can quickly do it. There's, just Temi.com, Rev.com. The great thing is it will just go through and transcribe with literally it's AI, a couple of minutes, and then you can just go through and clean up any of the mistakes. But around the actual data itself, there's 4 things that you really need to consider. And one question is, who owns that data? If you're in a small company, maybe it's just you, or if you're in a slightly larger company, maybe it's someone else on your team. So who is going to own this data? And also, who can access the data? Are they within your department? Are they outside of your department? Can sales or product or marketing access the data? And then the big question is, who's going to take the time to analyze this data and to clean it? Like I said, AI platforms are great at quick transcription, but they do make a lot of errors. And at this point, somebody's going to need to go through and correct the AI's mistakes. So who will that be? And then who's going to analyze the data over time to look for trends between customers? So, at the beginning, maybe you only have a couple customers that you're doing this with as they exit. But if you're going to continue to do this for months or years, you want to see what changes in the data there is. So who's going to be responsible for that? And then who is responsible for determining actionable items? And who is responsible for executing on them? So whatever comes out of these interviews that you find are areas that you want to take action on and change, who's responsible for that? Okay. That was a lot of information. My apologies to you, but here we go. I've summed it all up for you. And I'm going to mention this now. I've actually put this in a guide for you. And at the end, we'll give you the link. You don't need to write all of this down. I've taken every single one of these best practices from this talk. And you'll have it all in one place so you can refer to it whenever you need to. Okay, so you're going to need 2 team members that are dedicated to conducting all the interviews. You want to choose the appropriate thank you gift and decide who owns the data, who can access the data, who's going to analyze it, and who is going to be responsible for executing on the data. All right, so I really like this part. We're pre-writing the questions. This is the fun stuff. This is where you get to determine the types of questions you want answered. And just like with everything you're doing with the exit interviews, the questions have to reflect that one purpose that you decided way back in the purpose of the interview section. So if this is your first time, you're going to be running exit interviews, I suggest for simplicity's sake, if you have a bigger company, don't involve the other teams in the process just yet. You want to have a full trial run of the exit interview process before bringing in other teams. And if you're currently running exit interviews, this is perfect time to bring other teams in and just make sure everything's aligned with that purpose of the interviews. Okay, you might be wondering how long? No more than 30 minutes. You're going to have approximately 5 to 10 questions only, and in 1 minute I'm going to explain why, and the questions should be categorized into 2 or 3 themes. So I'm going to take you through that right now so you understand what that means. So, for example, if your purpose is to understand why accounts of a certain size are leaving, then your themes might be reasons for leaving. So you want to ask questions around why, how they felt, how the customer came to that decision. Maybe you want to ask questions around product, what they hope to achieve with the product, what they didn't like, what they did like. And then communications, like were you reaching out too frequently, not frequently enough, what did they like, what didn't they like. So you can see from this example alone, I have three themes and 10 questions. So that's plenty of questions for a 30-minute interview. That's all you need. Now, here's your best practices for this part. Your questions must align with the purpose of conducting the interviews. Interviews should be maximum 30 minutes. You have 2 or 3 themes with a maximum of 5 to 10 questions for the entire interview. And in this section of step 1, the pre-interview, this can be the most challenging of all the pre-interview parts. So I'm going to transition and take you into this. This is often where people get caught up, and it's populating with the right people. So populating with the right people is really critical for the success of your exit interview strategy. And depending on the purpose of the interviews you decided to, way back in the beginning of your 5 Ps, who you will invite will differ. And if your purpose is to get a better understanding of all the customers in the account, then you'll be reaching out to all of your customers who are exiting. However, if you just want to speak with decision makers, then you will only be reaching out to decision makers. And this matters because you want to have enough customers participate so you can start seeing patterns. You start seeing patterns in the responses when you get about 10 or so interviews. Okay, so this is how you're going to recruit. There's 2 ways that we do it with all of our clients. One is if you have an automated cancellation flow, and the second is to oh my goodness, sorry. My apologies, I kind of got ahead of myself. There's that. Oh, that's why. So there's going to be 2 ways that you're going to go through. One is through an automated cancellation flow, and the second is to directly ask them to participate. I'm going to speak to each of those right now. So if you're going to do it through an automated cancellation flow, cancellation flows are a fantastic place to start because what you do is they're going through the cancellation flow is you just insert a question asking if your exiting customers would like to participate in a 30-minute interview. They just click on a button and then they can schedule and then have the interview. The story at the beginning that I told you about, they had a cancellation flow. That's how we did it. And it's fantastic, in fact, for getting people recruited in. Now, if you're going to do it directly by asking your customers to participate, you want to reach out, especially if they're on a contract or a plan. Reach out a few weeks before and ask if they'll participate in an exit interview. You can do this several ways. You can reach out by video. If you have meetings with your customers or clients, you can do it in your last meeting. And then through email or even do it in-app if you have some software. So as is the case with most of us, once we've decided to leave, so it doesn't matter if it's a job or a place we're living or a relationship, the biggest challenge that you're going to have is that our minds start focusing on the future and we want to move forward and leave the past behind. So this is going to be your biggest obstacle for getting participants in your exit interviews is in their mind, they're already moving on. So what's really important is to ask for these interviews as soon as you find out the customer is leaving, because each minute, hour, day, week that slips by means your customers are less likely to participate. So here are the best practices for this section. 2 ways to recruit into your exit interviews. One, like I said, is via an automated cancellation flow, and the second is directly ask them to participate. And you do want to assume low participation rates at first until you get better at recruiting. So you're going to want to just tweak your process so that you can get your participation rates to go up. Now, here's a fun one. Practice. I touched on this earlier. Interviewing is a skill. Before your interviewers start interviewing customers, what you should do is practice mock interviews with your team. Use the questions you've created to see how they flow, or maybe that you need to change the order. So you want to assign different scenarios to your mock customers so that some are leaving with a positive experience of your company and others are leaving with a negative experience. You really want to encourage your mock customers to express different emotions like anger, joy, disappointment, and ambivalence, because your interviewers will experience this range of emotions when they interview real customers. So it's immensely helpful for the interviewers to learn how to handle these emotions in practice scenarios where they can safely make mistakes and learn new ways of handling the process. So no surprise then that the best practice is to practice both positive and negative mock interviews with a range of emotions. Again, anger, frustration, happiness, ambivalence, all of that. All right. Thank you for keeping me so far. I hope that you've been interested in this, because now we're going to the interview itself. Okay, I love doing these. They are fantastic because this is where you can really get that deep knowledge that can inform action and help lead to stronger decisions. So I am not going to spend a whole heck of a lot of time here, but I'll take you through the basic structure of an interview. You ready for this? There's the introduction. This is where your trust is built. If you do it well, the customer should feel comfortable that they can share their true responses to your questions. And they will open up and share those things that are typically locked inside. And this is really the goal that you're searching for. Next, you're going to ask your questions. That's pretty straightforward. You'll just want to be aware of your tone of voice and how you ask, and also when to probe the customer for more details. Let's say if they didn't quite give you much of an answer, you might just want to ask them to tell you a little bit more about what that answer meant. And lastly, the close. And this is where you close the interview and offer the appreciation thank you gift. And this is probably the best time to mention this. This is huge. Record all your exit interviews. You will need them recorded so you can transcribe them and analyze them. Otherwise, you're just left to trying to scratch some notes quickly, and that's always tough. So record, record, record. Here you go. The best practices. Each interview should have the following stages: introduction, ask questions, and a close. Of course, record all your interviews. All right, you've now done the pre-interviews, you've done the interviews. What happens post-interview? This is step 3. So post-interview, with the interviews are now complete, now it's time to make sense of the data and start trying to team it up with your company objectives and metrics. So I suggest collecting all of your interviews into one place so that those teams and people who you identified earlier can easily access the data. So this could be something like a voice of the customer program, a CRM, or even like as simple as a Google Drive spreadsheet. Okay, and this is what you're going to do with your data. I'm going to give you actual examples. So first thing, you chose your themes back in step 1 when you were pre-writing the interview questions. And this was the example I gave you. The reasons for leaving, remember, you wanted to understand why they were leaving, how they felt, how they came to the decision. You want to talk about product, what they hope to achieve with the product, what they liked, what they didn't like, and then communications. You know, were you reaching out too frequently? Were you not reaching out enough? What they liked, what they didn't like. So these are going to be the themes that you're going to categorize. And in this particular case, the reasons for leaving, product, and communications. And as you can see over those little rectangles on the right-hand side, it's going to look like that. You're just going to broadly categorize. Because the third step is we're going to take that and get even more granular with it. But first, what we're going to do is look for what's called positive and negative sentiment. So the quickest way to determine actionable insights that lead to reducing churn and keeping your customers longer is by categorizing the interviews by sentiment. And there's 3 types of sentiment: positive, negative, and neutral. And what this will do is provide you with an overall sentiment. So in this example, you can see that out of the 55 interviews, 34 of them had some sort of negative sentiment or negative emotion, negative feeling. All right, so that is step 2. Step 1 is you're looking for your broad categories. Step 2 is you're looking at the emotions, the sentiment. And then here is number 3. We're going to look at smaller themes. So as you read through the interviews, you'll see that there are smaller themes that you can categorize, and these become the areas where actionable insights occur. So in the example I'm going to show you, you can see that attention to detail and responsiveness are 2 of the smaller themes. So just note that the examples I'm going to give you from this point forward aren't from exit interviews, but they're equally as useful for your customer feedback strategy as they are for your exit interviews. So have a quick read of this. Now, I'm sure just by reading that, you can get the sentiment, which is this person was not particularly happy. But you can also see the sub-themes. So communication, there was some issues around responsiveness, and also attention to detail. So what you want to do is you want to rank these smaller themes according to the biggest impact on churn and revenue. Which of these 3 themes, if you were to focus on them and address them, would retain your customers longer and also positively impact your revenue? And of course, you're not done here, because the great thing is you can take this and create stories, case studies, and use cases. And this is, to me, the best part of conducting exit interviews. You get these awesome stories, you get case studies, you get use cases. And if you properly establish trust in the intro of the interview, the customer should feel comfortable enough to share their true, deep responses, rather than just sort of surface level ones that we sometimes give to strangers. So customers will open up and tell you stories, like the good stories and the bad stories. And often in these stories, you'll hear their true thoughts. And it's because they're speaking. And when we speak, we don't filter our thoughts the same way as we do in text. So in reading through the transcripts, you'll find stories for case studies and discover some new use cases even. Here's an example I want you to read and see if you can figure out the main story being told here and the possible outcome that may happen with this particular customer. So the main story here is that this customer has gone from being really satisfied with the service to now experiencing frustration. And the outcome of this, if this situation does not change, this customer is at really high risk of churning. So these stories become the basis to brainstorm the right improvements to address the situations raised by the customer. And the reason is because they're the customer's actual words. It's because these are the customer's actual words, thoughts, and feelings. And it becomes really hard to disregard or question because these are actually what the customer thinks and feels. So you want to look at any internal notes that you might have with your company to understand the reasons the customers gave as to why they're leaving. And you may discover there's a bigger gap than anticipated between, it says CSM's notes here, just ignore that and say the internal notes, and the customer's view in the exit interview. So the last point I want to make about the stories, the case studies, the new use cases is that by recording the exit interview, you can include portions of that video or audio or text in your presentations to your internal stakeholders, and then also start using them for marketing or even in your sales process, because what it does is sets the stage for powerful discussions. So now we're going to focus on sharing the results to drive action. And by this point, you're ready to share the results of your interviews with those teams and team members you identified back in step 1, which was the pre-interview stage. So you want to send an email to internal stakeholders informing them of the trends. You want to meet with internal stakeholders to review feedback and assign actions in an accessible place to the respective area of business where the churn or revenue impact will be the greatest. And you want to measure the change in sentiment over time. So what you want to do is really, you want, if you have internal stakeholders, you want to keep them updated on the progress and provide visibility into the impact of the actions. If a customer left because a feature that's lacking, reach out to let that customer know when this feature might be available. And if necessary, hand it off to your sales team to follow up. And then what you want to do is reconnect with your customer roughly 90 days after the last date of service, because you never know if they're working with a competitor. They might be unsatisfied over there and they're willing to come back. So you want to create some sort of special offer for canceled clients or exited clients. So perhaps, a discount in coming back, something like that, to let them know that, you really appreciate that they've taken a second chance and come back. So your best practices here, you want to collect those interviews in one place. You want to broadly categorize themes. You want to look for positive and negative sentiment. You want to look for smaller themes. You want to create those stories, case studies, use cases, and then share the results to drive action. I'm just going to cover here the biggest challenges that you're going to encounter and their solutions. So just like any business activity, there's going to be some challenges with your exit interviews. Here are the most common challenges and their solutions. 1, create a customer interview program. So setting it up is definitely one of the biggest challenges. Like I said, this talk will have all of the best practices put together in one guide, so you can just download this and have all the information there to help you set up a successful program. The interview skills development, it does take time, so have your 2 interviewers practice and develop their skills. And then struggling to gain customer participation. You definitely want to set expectations early in the customer relationship that there will be an exit interview when the customer cancels. You can also add the interview to a contract if that's how you work with your customers. So considering adding this to part of the contract, and it's easier to get your customers to participate when the time comes. You definitely want to end on a good note. So if the expectation of an interview hasn't been set either verbally or in the contract, let the customer know that you'd like to end the relationship on a good note by asking about their experience with their company. And then you want to analyze the data and find the right stories. So you can use in-house data analysts. If your company has them, remember again, record the interviews, get them transcribed, and you can also use something like voice of the customer software to help you. Now, many people ask about whether they should hire a third party to do this or to do it in-house. I'm going to take you quickly through that. Either way is good, but there are some situations where it's far better to do in-house and other situations where you should hire a third party. So the pros of in-house, you get to develop new skills. It's better for early growth companies, and it's also a lot cheaper. Now, here are some of the cons. It takes a longer time to complete, especially with the data analysis. Sometimes you have suboptimal data because it's a skill to interview and getting the questions right, and also learning how to probe the customer's answers. So sometimes you get suboptimal data, and a lot of companies just quickly abandon it because honestly, the analysis part can be pretty intense, and it's taking away from other resources where they could put their time and effort. Hiring a third party, there are some pros to it. There's a professional skill set. These are professionals who do this. It's fast and it's flexible, but there's also cons to hiring a third party, and here they are. They can be expensive. Got to make sure that they are the right fit for the project, and some of them have a wait list. Now, I'm not going to take you through all of these. I'm going to fly by it. There is, in the guide, you're going to see these questions, and you can go through and just ask these 7 questions so that you decide, is it best to do this in-house, or is it best to hire a third party to do it? Okay, here we go, principles to guide you. We're finishing up now. The customer is doing you a favor by participating, so your customers have no stake in this, but you certainly do. You want to respect the value they're giving, and that's their time, which they will never get back. So remember that they are really doing you a favor, and honor that by giving an appropriate thank you gift and thanking them. Remember, you want to leave the relationship on a high note. The second thing is you want to dig down into the feelings. We all make decisions made on emotion first, and then we back it up with cognitive processes. So it's not enough to just find out why they canceled. It's not enough to understand their thinking. You want to know how they felt. What impact did that decision have on them, or their team, their company? At some point, the sentiment will point out the gaps in expectations, and that's where you're going to find the most actionable information so that you can better retain your customers. And number 3, high participation rate is purposely created. So getting a strong participation rate for your exit interviews and for all your customer feedback means that you need a strong customer feedback engagement strategy and system. So as you see there in red, high participation rates, they don't happen in a vacuum. They're purposely created and developed. So as much as you can, let your customers know they are valued and that their opinion matters. And you want to show them this, not tell them, and they'll happily participate in your exit interviews. So I'm going to close this talk with another story from a customer exit interview. This time my customer was very surprised by the results, but in a good way. So this client came to us because they were making a big decision in their company. So they were deciding whether they should stay where they are or go up market and attract new, larger customers, which meant they'd really have to expand their product, their marketing. They knew that their current product was very limited, and they knew a lot of their customers left because they had outgrown the product. So they hired us to conduct exit interviews of their clients to help them decide whether they should stay the size they were or expand their product and grow into a new market. And what we did is we ended up speaking with 40 of their customers, and when we were reporting the results of our findings to the customer, one particular interview jumped out at them. In fact, they actually stopped the meeting so that they could go back and hear it again. And what we had done was take a snippet from one of the interviews where the exiting customer was raving about her customer contact. In fact, she said that if she could give an 11 out of 10, she would. Like, this exiting customer was so thrilled with the service she received that she was actually upset that she had to leave the company. So, needless to say, our client was thrilled to hear this, and they took that interview and they shared it company-wide because they had no idea that their service had such a positive influence on their customers. And that's why it's so important to interview your exiting customers, because you just never know what you'll discover. That's it. That's the end. So what I'm going to do is actually stop my share so that I can, hello everyone, I can see you all now. This is great. I don't know if you know what it's like to present on Zoom, but you don't have many opportunities to sometimes see people when you're presenting. Let's get into some questions. We don't have that much time left, but I tried to rush through as quickly as possible because I want to hear what sort of questions you have. And if it's a little more broad, even around customer feedback, hey, that's okay, because this is certainly also what I do, all sorts of customer feedback. So feel free to unmute your mic and ask me some questions.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I don't know if you went over this. I had to hop out for just a few minutes, but if it's a company that's like product led and they're just kind of signing up for free trials, so it's very like low touch.
Yep.
How would you suggest getting those interviews? It's already kind of a low touch scenario.
Yep. Are these customers that are leaving? Or are you?
Yes.
Okay. So, is there a cancellation flow?
No. So this would almost be like they're actually just churning out of the trial. So it's like really early in their journey. So we really just have their email. Not too much touch points or information. It's just kind of how they use the product and their email.
And that's, if you have their email, that's how you'll reach out and ask them to participate. When you reach out, let them know the purpose of it, that it is not, you're not attempting to upsell them or get them to be a paying customer. That's one of the biggest mistakes when customers are in these exit interviews. They are not sales opportunities. You're simply looking to try to understand their situation better. So you want to put that, and then also what would be that thank you appreciation gift. Be very clear about it, and also how long. So considering that these are free trial users, you might not need 30 minutes. You might be able to do 15 to 20 minutes because they may not have as much engagement with the product. But even getting, 15, 20 minutes discussion with them, you're going to learn a huge amount of information about why they are not becoming paying customers.
Yeah, and the challenge is getting interviews. Like, would you suggest a few questions just as like a short survey in the email instead, or really try to get the interview?
No, you want to speak with people because you already don't have much relationship with them. So if you can get people to talk to you, because just like you did here, you asked us a secondary question, you wanted to know a little more. That's what interviews do over surveys. I get that surveys are easy. Like, we don't have to face anyone, but they're not a dialogue. It's not a conversation. And so, yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking at first to get on and ask questions. But as you just did here, Anna, like, perfect point, we're having a dialogue now. And so I can learn more about you and how you're feeling and what some of your challenges were because we're having a conversation. Surveys are great. They're easy, but you're just not going to get the depth of data that you're looking for.
I know. I'm 100% with you. It's just more getting people to agree to it is a bit harder, especially when you don't have that relationship. But
so you're gonna, and because of that, it's kind of like even to acquire customers at that point, you're going to need to reach out to a lot more people before you're going to get. But once you start, and you can even ask this question: why did you agree to take this interview? And then some people are like, oh, it's because of the whatever you were offering, a gift card. But maybe it's because they actually kind of liked the product, but blank was the reason why, they didn't go any further with it, and they kind of wanted to give feedback. So you're going to actually hear both, but ask them, why did you do this? And then put that back into your recruitment process.
Thanks, Anita.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question, Anita.
Yeah.
You just mentioned, sorry, it's not a good hair day. I would have shared my pictures. You mentioned that these exiting interviews are not a selling sort of point. Now, for us to have these sort of interviews, I just wonder if we noticed in the interview that there is a chance that they would be able to come back, right? There's a chance to turn it around. However, they want something monetary. So how do you make it not be, because I think they are looking for us most of the time to see what we can offer, if there was a reason, right? So how do you say we change it around to not make it more of a sale pitch rather than?
Right. Fantastic question. Ask for another meeting. Leave this just as the interview, and then ask them at the end, would they be interested in speaking further about other opportunities? But that is like kind of the last question you ask, and assume that, your entire exit interview is done, and then ask them. And if they say, yes, I'm interested, then of course you can ask, well, when would you like to have this conversation? And then you can book it then. What ends up happening, and it's really challenging, especially if you're in sales, is to not take that opportunity when it sounds like they're interested. But the whole purpose is to try to get through the entire exit interview without sort of transitioning into sales, even though the opportunity, seems like it's coming up. Keep it to the purpose, the one purpose, the exit interview. Once you're finished that, then you can ask them, like, hey, when we were talking, I heard whatever it might be that, you thought might represent interest from them. Would you be interested in? And then, whatever the proposal is. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. It's harder than it is, because sometimes we won't get, we tried hard to get that one interview, so we might not have a chance. So we just want to take advantage of it right away. But I understand what you're saying. So I think there has to be a middle ground somewhere.
Yeah. The other thing is too, with exit interviews, especially if you post it at the beginning, and this is why I want to be really clear about this. If you post it at the beginning that we're just going to ask about your experience about being a customer, why you chose to leave, and then somewhere along the line you start talking sort of about sales and opportunities, a lot of people, including myself, feel like that's a bit of a bait and switch. So if you want, when you're recruiting them into these interviews, you could be clear and say, we might talk to you about these opportunities. Then people don't feel, I don't want to say taken advantage of, but we've all had it, like even with clickbait, right? Where you click on something and you go to a site and you're like, this isn't even what I wanted to see. That trust factor is really important. So if you can either make it clear when you're reaching out or booking the interview, that would be great, or wait till the end and then bring it up there. But at least this way, like you said, if it's really hard to recruit them, at least the customer knows then what they're getting into and has an opportunity to say, hey, yes, I'm okay with speaking about those opportunities further.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Anybody else?
Hi. How are you today?
I'm good.
First of all, thanks for conducting this session. This is very insightful. Actually, I do have one question. I guess most of the CSMs, they face this. So there are always this sets of customer in this SaaS model or in the subscription-based model, which are very low-touch customer, but they were the customer who are using your product like on the good level, and suddenly they comes up with a cancellation request, and they just put that cancellation right from the product, right? And you just receive that notification, hey, your customer is churning or they are canceling, right? And so we try, as a CSM, we try to reach out to those low-touch customers, but unfortunately, there's always unresponsiveness, right? So it's to get in touch with those customers. So I just want to know your ideas about the same situation, like what all other alternatives we can choose apart from calling or emailing them, or any kind of email campaigns what we can run for such customers. Because I have even faced that. Even if we do offer them the Amazon voucher, right, still they are not responsive.
Right. That is, Yasha, that is it's a huge topic, and a lot of it has to do is because they don't feel that there's any close relationship with the company. And so it can become a bit of a challenge to do this. One is you can see if the product team will allow for a button to come up when they're canceling in the app to ask them if they'd be interested in having an interview. Again, that's no different. Just put it as part of the cancellation flow. And then sometimes, again, because it's not a strong relationship, you're just going to have to try different things. If you have phones, see if you can reach out with SMS or text them. And those are just some of the different ways that you can try. It is frustrating, but that's a function, though, of the communications of with the customer and the product. And unfortunately, unless the company wants to increase that engagement with the customer so that there is more responsiveness, there's unfortunately not a whole heck of a lot you can do beyond what you're already doing. My heart certainly goes out to you, though, because I know how tough it is to try to recruit. But see if you can get it in-app in the cancellation flow, and if that will make a difference.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for your suggestions, Anita. But to be very honest, like I'm already trying that, but it's also difficult to get insights from such low-touch customers.
Yeah, it's tough. The other thing is, I don't know, Yasha, if you can do this, but increase your budget and increase what you're offering them, and in terms of that appreciation thank you gift. It's not necessarily the gold standard, but if it's going to work so that you start getting some feedback, then it's worth offering more money so that people are more enticed to participate.
Thank you so much, Anita, for your insights. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I know we've got 2 minutes left. Sorry, just muted myself.
Anita, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maggie asked earlier if you tell the customers what you're going to give them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. First of all, if you haven't followed me over on LinkedIn, come on over there. I talk a lot about customer feedback, about voice of the customer, and churn. So that is certainly, please do come over there. And I'm going to, was I not sharing my screen there? No. There it is. Okay. There it is on LinkedIn. And I'm going to show you where we need to go to find, oh geez. Nope. Haha. I had it up, and of course now I've closed it. I can't find it. Okay. AnitaToth.ca is, there it is. I knew I had it up. Is where you want to go, and here it is, the website. So you can see here in the top left corner, AnitaToth.ca, free info. It's one of the menu options. And you're going to scroll down here, how to run customer exit interviews. I do not gate my content, so right here, direct download. If you click on that, you can download this whole presentation. It's just in Canva right now, so you can just click through. This should look familiar, all of those best practices. And again, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to continue the conversation if I didn't manage to get your questions answered. And let me just stop the share. We are at the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us. And I really enjoyed this. Again, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any further questions. Take care, everyone. Bye.